and welcome to your Module 3 introduction video. This module will be a deep dive into the foundational skill of word recognition, and we will examine how exactly the brain learns to read words accurately and fluently. Our first reading is Chapter 3 in Steps to Success. In our last module, we carefully studied language acquisition and comprehension. We learned from Scarborough's rope that the other major branch of skilled reading includes word recognition skills. This can be broken down into phonological awareness, decoding, and sight word recognition. Each of those three skills is separate and important, and they ultimately lead us toward the same goal of accurate and automatic word reading. We know that without accurate and automatic word recognition, our comprehension suffers. So how do we masterfully teach word recognition so that all of our students experience reading success? For starters, we need to acknowledge and remember that reading is by no means a natural process. Our brains don't come hardwired for reading. In fact, estimates of about 20% of our students will demonstrate neurodivergence with recognizing letters and letter sounds and may never fully master alphabetics or reading without concerted effort and deliberate strategies. One area of critical importance that we can address in our instruction is deliberately teaching phonological awareness skills. Developmentally, this should come before we bring alphabetics into the mix, and we should not assume that all students come to school or come to kindergarten with these skills. Many of you have mentioned that you have incorporated the Hegarty Phonemic Awareness resource into your instruction, which is why I'm just taking a moment to highlight this in my presentation. This is not an additional required resource or reading for this course. It's just a really popular tool that you might have heard about that helps me explain a few things. So this resource helps you benchmark and instruct students in phonological awareness skills, which are all auditory. So you could do them all blind with your eyes closed. They require no knowledge of letters or print. So this resource explicitly and systematically teaches phonemic and phonological awareness skills in short daily activities. We're talking like 10 minutes. So listen, I know Munger makes a big deal of differentiating between phonological and phonemic awareness, but I promise you the only time you're really going to care about that distinction is on the fort or when you're in college. All of these skills fall under phonological awareness umbrella. Phonemic awareness is a specific sub-skill that looks at the phoneme level instead of the syllable or the word part level. So basically, if you say phonological awareness, you won't be wrong. It's like all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares. But I digress. Okay. The reason this resource found its way into my school's toolkit recently is because a deep dive into our data showed us that students were not thriving with phonics instruction because they lacked the foundation of phonological awareness. For as long as I can remember, we've based our phonics instruction on the assumption that students come to school with a natural level of phonological awareness. Maybe they pick it up from nursery rhymes, from Sesame Street, from songs, wordplay, or just language immersion. How wrong we were. You'll learn in Shifting the Balance that assuming phonemic awareness develops naturally is a very common misunderstanding. In our root cause analysis of student data in my district, we noticed our students were struggling with decoding and encoding simple CVC words because they couldn't always hear or isolate each individual sound in the word, nor could they easily blend those sounds back together. And when you add blends into the mix, it's even more obvious the older they get. So students would spell or read words like slip as sip, and we're like, hey, where'd that L go? So if we don't hear it, we can't read it or spell it. So then it's back to basics with phonological awareness intervention. Once you have a solid base of phonological awareness, then you can begin to build phonics onto that foundation. Phonics is the practice of explicitly mapping phonemes or sounds to graphemes or letters, and vice versa. Phonics instruction should be systematic and sequential and include teaching students about syllable types. So clover, closed, consonant LE, open, vowel teams, silent or final E, and R controlled. Those are the 6 main syllable types. On the left, you can see sound boxes or Elkonin boxes and a simple CVC word. We know the word shop. We know it has 4 letters, but what we want is for students to hear 3 sounds, sh, a, p. Each of those sounds gets a box, and the digraph SH is actually just one sound represented by 2 letters. It takes a while to get the hang of it, but it becomes more intuitive when we map sounds to letters and vice versa. The main resource I refer to for this practice is the book in the middle here, the Phonics and Spelling Through Phoneme Grapheme Mapping. It gives me a teaching progression and a sample mapping for all kinds of syllable types and spelling patterns. So when I find myself asking like, gosh, what do we do when there's a silent E or a vowel team, or what about a multisyllabic word? Then this book is my guide to figuring that out. Another important decoding or phonics skill includes blending, as shown in the word families picture. For this activity, students should use their knowledge of letters and sounds and tap out each sound before blending them to make the word. Here it's actually an onset and rhyme, so r, an, ran, s, at, sat. With repeated practice with both real and nonsense words, you'll see lots of growth in decoding and encoding. I also really like the Making Words series for practicing manipulating words. This is a synthetic phonics approach that progresses from simple, short vowel CVC words into more complex spelling patterns. It gives students the opportunity to play with words and see how they chain or evolve as you move letters around. Finally, we have to explicitly teach strategies for sight words. You may hear them called snap words or sight words or high frequency words. Each of those means something different, but people tend to use them all the same. Regardless of what you call them, they are common everyday words that have some features that aren't easily decoded following the traditional rules. I'm saying in air quotes. Think about the word love. If we decoded it using the silent E rule, it would say loave. So that's just a word we need to memorize and process rapidly when we see it. Typically, rote memorization, constant exposure, and flashcards are a winning strategy for our visual and neurotypical learners, but that doesn't work for all students. That's when we need to pull in some multimodal, kinesthetic, meaning-based, and word manipulating practices into your word study routine. I really like Jan Richardson. She has some very popular and successful strategies like what's missing. I do that with my own 2nd grade daughter. I write her spelling word and I erase one letter and I ask her which letter is missing. We do that till we've gone through the whole word. Then there's mix and fix, where I just give her the letter tiles in a pile and she has to put them in the right order. Table writing, where they just trace the word on the table, but we don't make the sounds. So if I were doing the word love, I wouldn't go l, v, e, like that wouldn't work, right? It doesn't map. So actually we just tap the letters. We say L-O-V-E, love. Other strategies include like looking at the shapes of words, noticing patterns like vowel teams and where they happen in the word, like AY is always at the end of the word, looking at tall versus short letters, teaching words in families like could, should, would. You probably know quite a few sight word practices, and if not, I promise Pinterest is full of them. Your next readings will be in Shifting the Balance, which I find to be very practical and light to read. In Shift 2, Berkins and Yates underscore the importance of making phonemic awareness instruction intentional and deliberate. While that sounds serious and laborious, we also have to remember that phonemic awareness instruction should be fun and engaging. Think about preschool and kindergarten. It's supposed to be fun. There are cute ways to fit it into the nooks and crannies of your day. You don't need to like necessarily allot a chunk or a block of your day for this. When I ask students to line up, I might call them by a rhyme word like, you can line up if your name rhymes with shabby. Or we might do a blending drill where I have, oh, Dr. D has a case of the slows. And I ask the students if they can speed me up. So I'll say, my word is branch. And I hope that they can say it back to me, branch. We could easily do this with new vocabulary words in science, so you can fit it into anywhere in your day. Obviously, this makes more sense as a whole class universal instruction at the primary grades, and the older students might encounter this more in like small groups or in intervention. In my school, our fourth and fifth graders who are still working on these skills, we might use pop-its to help tap out the sounds, or we might use math counters to push up sounds in a word to honor their desire to use more grown-up tools and tricks. In Shift 3, we make our way to phonics and the alphabetic principle. Now we're in orthographic mapping territory, talking about decoding and encoding and matching letters to sounds. Berkins and Yates stress that phonics needs to be taught systematically and sequentially. I keep saying that over and over again. You must have a plan with a plan to assess and differentiate. Having a strong plan is key to collaborating with all of the peers that work with your students and tackling skills in a progressive manner. We always start simple. Think about the most common letters and the most common syllable patterns or spelling patterns, and you go slow to go fast. You make sure students have the time to transfer these skills from the isolated activities they're doing with you at your kidney table to their actual text that they're reading. Make sure they're transferring that. In Shift 4, Berkis and Yates talk about high frequency words. So they take the time to distinguish between high frequency words and sight words, which are sometimes used interchangeably. You'll even hear me do it. I'm sorry, it's hard. But sight words can be any word we have stored away for quick retrieval, like even the word veterinarian. Whereas high frequency words are just that. They're words that occur very frequently in our text and our speech. There are several strategies referenced earlier in this presentation for helping students learn words automatically, and not just through rote memorization and flashcard drills. This chapter helps us understand that we don't actually memorize the whole word when we read it. We look through the word and process the letters and sounds so rapidly that it seems that we've memorized it as a unit. And it doesn't serve us to call words rule breakers or irregular. That is kind of a lie because all words can be mapped in some way, right? And it frustrates kids to tell them how hard the English language is and all these rule breakers and irregulars. There's typically some regularity or parts of a word with reliable spelling that can be pointed out to students. So as far as assignments with this module, of course you will complete your writer's notebook or your teacher's diary and catalog your learning and connections and respond to the 4 prompts on this screen. And your workload will be a bit streamlined for this module because you'll actually turn in your writer's notebook entry for this module as your discussion post. As always, you'll share an original post of 300 to 500 words by the first deadline and return over the next week to post 2 responses to your colleagues by the second deadline. You've all been really crushing that. It's fun to read. You'll also add to your Philosophy of Literacy Statement graphic organizer. In this module, we learned about foundational skills, so please jot your thoughts while it is fresh in your mind. Then, please watch the presentation on Professional Growth Plan assignment first. For this module, you'll focus on brainstorming and drafting your professional growth goals. You're probably in the thick of doing your SLO right now, so this should all overlap. In the next module, your goals will be due. Last, watch the presentation on the article summary assignment. This assignment will support and connect with your professional growth plan. For this module, you will focus on locating and reading your article of choice and writing an initial draft. The final version of this assignment will be due in the next module. That's it for this Module 3 video. Have a great week.